Hey guys, back with another Fallout 4 countdown, and today I want to go ahead and go over 10 of what I think are some of the best legendary guns and weapons in Fallout 4. Now before we start, this video will mostly be restricted to legendary weapons as opposed to unique weapons. And the difference between the two is that legendary weapons tend to require the player to farm them from legendary enemies, while unique weapons have unique names and a specific location with a specific legendary effect. I'm also trying to go for a variety of legendary weapon effects in combination with a variety of weapons. Otherwise, this list would probably just consist of mostly weapons with the wounding effect, explosive effect, two-shot effect, and furious effects, as those tend to be the best legendary weapon effects in the entire game. But without further ado, these will be the top 10 best and coolest legendary guns and weapons in Fallout 4, starting now. Number 10, the Staggering Flamer. While there are several weapons that work well with the staggering effect, like the Ripper and Minigun, I found that I actually prefer the effect the most on the Flamer. The main reason for this is because the Flamer is nice for dealing damage to multiple enemies at the same time, and it's possible to stagger enemies simultaneously rather than having to switch between different enemies with one gun or just switching to different enemies with the Ripper. Now, the staggering effect is often confused with the kneecapper effect. The difference is that the staggering effect temporarily stuns an enemy, while the kneecapper effect cripples an enemy's leg. Between the two, the staggering effect is more versatile, however the kneecapper effect has more permanent effects up against creatures. But like I said, the main advantage the Flamer has with this particular weapon effect is that you can stagger groups of enemies relatively easily, which opens them up to more of your Flamer attacks, which can also stagger them. In general, as long as enemies get close enough, you're not going to really have any problems with them fighting back. Now, my only real complaint is that the Flamer's damage is low, and it's difficult to raise this damage via perks and bobbleheads. Plus, some of the weapon upgrades actually reduce the weapon's range. Still, I think this is a great weapon to pick up. Number 9, the Kneecapper Pipe Pistol/Rifle. While not quite as effective on most human-type enemies because humans can use stim packs to heal their limbs, the kneecapper effect makes short work of most creatures and other animals that you will encounter. Now, in my opinion, automatic weapons are going to take advantage of the kneecapper effect the best, and you're going to want a weapon that has very inexpensive ammo. Hence, that's why I'm ultimately going to choose the pipe pistol or rifle, because 38 caliber ammo is found almost everywhere. It's also pretty easy to modify pipe pistols and rifles for automatic fire too, and because the kneecapper effect has a 20% chance to cripple a limb, having a higher fire rate will increase the speed at which you can cripple an enemy's legs. This strategy is extremely effective against enemies like Deathclaws, Mirelurks, and many of the other creatures that you can encounter. Overall, the kneecapper effect is awesome and can make dealing with some of the tougher creatures in this game way easier. And if you can manage to get this effect on a pipe pistol, you're pretty much set. Number 8, the Irradiated Gamma Gun. So the Gamma Gun is a deceptively powerful weapon. The way radiation damage works is instead of dealing direct damage to an enemy target like most other weapons, you're dealing radiation damage in such a way as to reduce that enemy's maximum health. Unfortunately, during combat, it looks like you're dealing the same amount of damage that you otherwise would be. However, you're actually lowering an enemy's maximum health rather than removing their hit points, so to speak. This is partially why radiation damage is effective against legendary enemies. By reducing their overall maximum health, they aren't recovering quite as much health when they mutate or transform. So in general, the Gamma Gun can prove to be a great tool to deal with legendary enemies that don't have significant radiation resistances. The Irradiated Gamma Gun is basically a stronger version of the regular Gamma Gun. The irradiated effect itself adds an additional 50 points of radiation damage on top of the Gamma Gun's inherent 100 or so radiation damage. And once you start adding perks like Nuclear Physicist and add in the additional energy damage that gets added with the Electric Signal Carrier antenna, you're going to have a great weapon for taking out some of the more difficult enemies. The downside is that the irradiated effect doesn't work well on some non-human enemies like robots, ghouls, and some super mutants. So if you do encounter legendary variants of those, you'll have to deal with them in more conventional ways with your conventional weapons. Number 7. The 2-shot railway rifle. So I think it's fair to say that the 2-shot effect is pretty great on all of the guns in Fallout 4. The biggest reason you would want a 2-shot weapon is because of the near flat and consistent damage boosts that it provides. And in general, the 2-shot effect should always be dealing better damage than having a legendary effect that deals enhanced damage to a specific enemy type. So for example, the Assassin's legendary effect, which deals more damage to humans, is largely inferior to the 2-shot effect. Now the main reason I've chosen the 2-shot railway rifle is because you can fire the weapon and get some ammo back. After all, you're firing 2 projectiles, and in some cases, both are usually recoverable. So you could fire 1 and get 2 back, and you're basically getting free ammo. So that's pretty cool. And this extends to a few other ammo types as well, including harpoons for the harpoon launcher from Far Harbor, and the modified bowling balls for the Striker Fatman. Provided the weapon at its core has the 2-shot effect, which it's worth mentioning that the Striker doesn't, and the big boy does, you should be able to retrieve some of the ammo fired. But between the railway rifle, harpoon launcher, and the modded Fatman, I would say that the railway rifle is the most convenient weapon to use. But once again, 2-shot is great on everything, but it's probably best on a weapon that allows you to retrieve some of the ammo that you just fired. Number 6. The Instigating Gauss Rifle. The Gauss Rifle makes one of the better uses of the instigating effect. While the 2-shot Gauss Rifle is probably better if you're not playing as a sniper, the instigating Gauss Rifle is capable of more damage overall, especially when you're firing at an enemy that is at full health from a hidden position. The instigating effect deals double damage to enemies that are at full health, so this means you can deal more damage than you could with the 2-shot effect. However, the disadvantage is that if an enemy becomes damaged, you lose out on this double damage potential, and for this reason, the instigating effect is at its most ideal with a stealth sniper build. What one can do is combine several different perks like Rifleman, Bloody Mess, Ninja, and Mr. Sandman to further boost the damage, and Ninja and Mr. Sandman in particular will improve your sneak attack multiplier, which is useful for further maximizing your total damage output when firing from a hidden position. While I would recommend that you always carry some type of secondary weapon while using an instigating Gauss rifle, I think you'll find that in most instances that this gun should pretty much wipe out whatever is in front of you. Just make sure you're always attacking enemies with maximum health, and try to avoid bringing companions along so they don't reduce your overall damage potential. Number 5. The Rapid Gatling Laser. The Rapid Gatling Laser is basically a further enhanced version of the regular Gatling Laser, which is already probably both one of the best laser weapons and also one of the best heavy weapons in Fallout 4. And the reason for this is because the Gatling Laser has great ammo consumption and is capable of dealing a lot of damage per shot. The Gatling Laser is known for having some pretty bizarre effects, though, when legendary weapon effects are applied. As an example, the Neverending effect creates a weapon that has truly infinite ammo. However, when the Rapid effect is applied and the charging barrel weapon customization is on the Gatling Laser, instead of getting the normally reduced fire rate, you're actually getting double the fire rate. According to the Fallout Wiki, this works because the charging barrel's customization reduces fire rate by 75%. While the Rapid effect increases fire rate by 25%. So when all is said and done, you're actually getting a 50% reduction in fire rate as opposed to the normal 75%. And what's nice about the Rapid Gatling Laser is there's a unique Gatling Laser that provides the exact same effects called the Final Judgment. So I would say if you decide to play through the final act as a member of the Institute, and then you defeat Elder Maxon and pick up the Final Judgment, then the Rapid Gatling Laser is going to be a great choice. I also think because there is a unique variant, in a certain sense, this is the easiest legendary weapon on this particular list to get. But if you're looking for a Gatling Laser, this is one that I'd recommend. Number 4. The Wounding Ripper. So the wounding effect is pretty brutal in Fallout 4. Most enemies don't have specific items or pieces of gear that increase their bleed resistance, and bleed damage effects can stack, which allow players to deal quite a bit of damage to enemies. The wounding effect makes most enemies in the game incredibly easy, due in large part to the fact that all of the damage you're dealing is not affected by any kind of damage resistance. However, the wounding effect has a tendency to only appear on melee weapons, and it tends to benefit the most from melee weapons with fast attack speed. This is why I would recommend the Wounding Ripper. And while you may not get quite the same range that you might have on other melee weapons, I think you'll find that a Wounding Ripper will simply allow you to walk up to enemies and defeat them relatively easily. While there is probably also a good case to be made for the Furious Ripper, I think you'll find that the Wounding Ripper's effects are far more immediate, and since most enemies in this game don't have vast reserves of health, I think you'll find that the wounding effect is going to be a lot more effective. But to be fair, both are excellent in the right scenario. Really, the only issue with the Wounding Ripper is getting one. After all, you have to get a Ripper, which is already fairly rare, and then you have to get a wounding effect to spawn on the Ripper, which is even more difficult. Though I suppose the same thing goes for the Furious Ripper as well, as both weapons are difficult to acquire. But if you can get either of them, both of them are phenomenal melee weapons. Number 3. The Explosive Shotgun. Now, Fallout 4 has two different types of shotguns. If possible, you're better off getting an explosive variant of the combat shotgun rather than the double-barrel shotgun, simply because the combat shotgun has better damage and a higher magazine size. And one of the reasons that explosive shotguns are recommended over explosive variants of other weapons is because it appears that the 15 points of additional explosive damage is applied to each projectile rather than being spread across all of the projectiles. As you can probably imagine, this makes explosive shotguns far more powerful as a result. Plus, things get more ridiculous when you start to add in damage boosts from specific perks like Rifleman, Bloody Mess, and the Demolition Expert perk. And as a general rule, if you have the explosive effect on a shotgun, it's generally a safe bet to assume that you're always going to be dealing far more damage than what is actually listed on the item card. Otherwise, there isn't really much else to the explosive shotgun other than that explosive shotguns can prove to be fairly powerful once the proper perks are taken. They're especially excellent for dealing with feral ghouls and glowing ones, since these types of enemies generally tend to be more susceptible to the loss of their limbs. I would say if you do manage to find an explosive shotgun, it might be a pretty good idea to build your character around it. Number 2, the Neverending Fatman. While the Neverending effect is excellent on a variety of weapons, it tends to really show its true potential on weapons with fairly low magazine sizes. This means weapons like the Fatman are perfect when combined with the Neverending effect, because the player will almost never have to reload, and you will gain greatly increased fire rate and possibly better DPS overall as a result. While you could argue that a 2-shot Fatman is better for maximizing your potential damage per mini-nuke fired, the Neverending Fatman is awesome if you have a slew of mini-nukes that you want to fire in rapid succession. Since the Fatman is so powerful anyway and has great synergy with Heavy Gunner, Demolition Expert perk, and a few other perks, the damage potential that you're going to be capable of here is pretty staggering. While this weapon may be a little more difficult to get on console without mods, and may be a little more unpractical due to the availability of mini-nukes, I think we can all agree that the amount of raw damage potential is what makes the Neverending Fatman awesome. If you can manage to find one of these while farming, I think you're going to have a pretty great time. Number 1, the Explosive Minigun. So the minigun that you get at the very beginning of Fallout 4 is relatively decent early on, and the DPS that you can manage to put out is pretty impressive. However, the main problem with the minigun is that it has a base damage of 8, and you need to have a gun nut perk level of 4 to raise that damage to 10. This basically means that the minigun is essentially too weak at higher levels, and you would probably be better off with something like the Gatling laser, which is similar but has higher base damage when you scale with upgrades. However, if you can manage to get your hands on the explosive minigun during your Fallout playthrough, you're probably getting your hands on one of, if not the best weapons in all of Fallout 4. While you aren't necessarily fixing the lousy damage upgrade unique to the minigun, the explosive effect almost triples the base damage of the weapon, and you're also getting great perk and bobblehead synergy, as perks like Heavy Gunner, Bloody Mess, Demolition Expert, and the explosive bobblehead will greatly affect your overall damage. In extreme cases, I've seen the damage per shot of the explosive minigun go from like 8 damage or so to like 76 or even the 80s, which is almost tenfold the original damage number. I would say that if you can get an explosive minigun in any difficulty, it basically turns the game into easy mode, as the explosive minigun should be able to pretty much wipe out whatever it is that's in front of you. That and 5mm ammo is relatively cheap once your charisma is high enough, so I don't think you'll have too many problems acquiring ammo. But alright guys, I think that's going to pretty much wrap up this particular video. If you like this video, feel free to leave a like, click the bell to join the notification squad, and as always, take care, and I'll see y'all next time.